Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Manhattan Community Board 11 Housing Committee meeting for the month of April. Today is April 4th, 2023. I am John Green, the committee chair. We are joined also by Marlene PF from the board office. But before we start the meeting, we have a few ground rules. First of all, no one may speak until granted the floor. Community board members, if you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. All of you know the drill. If you know where the participant icon is and where the raise hand function is. If you have a problem with your raise hand function, please let Marlene know, and she will do her best to help you with that. Let's see. The chat function should not be used for community board business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record because this is a public meeting, and also you also have to raise your hand through Zoom in order to ask a question or make a comment. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties, or if you want any information like phone numbers or email addresses or anything like that, but only for those things. Okay, please keep your questions and comments brief, please. I think this is that it helps a lot. I said, members of the public, if you have a comment or a question, just please raise your hand through Zoom and wait to be recognized that you have the floor. Okay, so now I call the meeting to order, I should say, at 6:43 p.m. And Marlene, if you would you do roll call, please?
Sure. Juhab Chowdhury. Diane Collier.
Present.
Raja Flores. Brandon Gillespie.
Present.
John Green.
Here.
Alonzo Johnson. Beverly Pabon.
Present, Shalom.
Claudia Perez.
Present.
Dawn Sanders. Anne Marie Vasquez.
She's
Is
excused.
excused. Thank you. Candy Vives Vasquez.
Here.
Thank you. And Jason Wu.
Present.
Dawn, I see your name. Do you want to say you're present for the record, please?
I'm definitely, I didn't hear my name though.
Okay, I got it. I called you. That's why I circled
Okay.
back. Thank you. You have a quorum, John.
Thank you, Marlene. The agenda was distributed and is available on the website. And so if there are no objections, the agenda will be adopted. Seeing no hands in objection, then that is done. Also, the March committee minutes are also on the website and have been if there are no objections to that, the minutes for March will be adopted. Seeing no raised hands, that is adopted as well. Okay, let's see what we got here. Announcements. Mayor Adams had issued Emergency Executive Order 339, which extends the emergency declaration for 30 days through April 20th, 2023, which means most of our meetings will still be done via Zoom, but just be prepared just in case if they do not, if he does not extend this order beyond that we'll be having in-person meetings. But you will be informed if of any changes. Are there any announcements by the committee? Are there any announcements from any member of the public? Hands. We can go on We can go on to the next slide, please. Okay, informational updates. Are there any committee members that have any informational updates? None there. Are there any members of the public have any informational updates that would be beneficial to the committee? No. Seeing no hands. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. Continued discussion in reference to the New York City Housing Authority, NYCHA permanent. Could you mute, please? Thank you. Continued discussion in reference of the New York City Housing Authority, NYCHA Permanent Affordability Commitment Together Program, PACT. Through PACT, developments will be included in the Federal Rental Assistance Demonstration, RAD, and convert to a more stable federally funded program called Project-Based Section 8. This allows NYCHA to unlock funding to complete comprehensive repairs while also ensuring homes remain permanently affordable and residents have the same basic rights as they possess in the public housing program. Okay, are the representatives from NYCHA here?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, John. So I'm going to be leading the presentation, although my colleague Heather Beck is going to share a presentation. So just let us know how you'd like to proceed with that.
You can share a screen. That's fine. But as soon as you're ready, the floor is yours, sir.
Okay, why don't I get started just to respect everyone's time and get to your, I imagine you have a number of questions. So my name is Jim Shelton. I'm a community planner in the real estate department at NYCHA. I'll give you a brief overview of what that is. So, the real estate department at NYCHA's mission overall is to provide, as you well know, safe, affordable housing for working class, low and moderate income New Yorkers. And of course, a main challenge what we have with that is major funding issues, which we'll get into some of the tools that we have today to address those. My department, the real estate department, where I'm a community planner, we're really tasked with managing real estate development on our properties, but also things like rehabilitation of our properties through tools like the PACT program. So we're going to give you an update on all of the active PACT projects in Community District 11. I'm also here tonight with my colleagues, Heather Beck and Sam Levine, who I'm just going to pass off the floor to them. We each manage different projects in different ways. So when we get to the update for their projects, I will pass things over to them. So with that, why don't I hop into things? Heather, if you can advance to the next slide. So I gave you a bit of an update on this. I was last here at CB11 in summer of 2021. And at that point, we were just starting some of these projects. They were in a very nascent stage. And I came to give an update with Brian Honan. That was basically the information you see on the screen here. And it really is, you saw it summarized and heard it summarized by John just a moment ago. But briefly, PACT is a tool we have to address our major capital repair backlog at NYCHA. So that backlog at this point is north of $40 billion. That's how much it would take to fully renovate all of our NYCHA housing stock and bring it up to a state of good repair across New York City. So PACT, Permanent Affordability Commitment Together, is a tool we have to bring sweeping comprehensive repairs all up front to select properties that are in that program. And PACT is really the local implementation of a federal program that was started under the Obama administration called RAD. And basically what it does is on the screen here, you see in orange, these small bars, that's the money we get as NYCHA from the federal government year after year. The blue bars are the growing capital needs we have. Every year we can't invest money from Congress. We're just not getting that funding. The blue bar goes up, right? The capital needs grow up. They grow exponentially. This program allows us to start addressing some of those needs with more robust additional funding from the federal government. But it does that by transitioning properties to what's called project-based Section 8. So that unlocks this money for comprehensive repairs, which I'll explain in a little bit. It does a few other things. And we are in the midst of that program, working with a lot of residents in your community district to go through that process as we speak. Next slide. So what does it do? Like, how does the program operate? You know, what actually has to happen to unlock that money in what we call a PACT conversion? So PACT, fundamentally, it depends on a partnership between NYCHA and entities that are either from the private sector or that are not-for-profit entities that must deliver certain things that all have to be approved in a plan by HUD in order to unlock this more robust project-based Section 8 funding. So it's really these three buckets you see on the screen here. They must deliver comprehensive repairs. So basically a top to bottom rehabilitation construction project at a select site going through this program. There must be new professional property management brought on board at that location to handle the day-to-day operations, the maintenance, the caretaking, the duties that NYCHA currently provides. A new entity comes in to provide property management. And the third bucket on the right side of the screen is this program brings in additional dedicated social services, funding for that at the sites that are going through the program. Now, this doesn't mean it replaces any social service programs or providers that exist on site today. This is additional wraparound services to complement any services that residents are benefiting from currently. All the while, these properties remain publicly controlled. So you may hear things like NYCHA selling buildings, we're selling land. It's not a sale, right? It's a leasing process. NYCHA retains ownership of the land and the buildings. We transition as NYCHA into a different role, more of an oversight role, but we're still administering things like the Section 8 subsidy, still filling vacancies from our wait list, still setting resident income, and still monitoring the performance of any of these teams that come in and do this work, because ultimately we have and retain the right to remove them if any conflicts come up that we feel necessitate intervention. We're really the monitor and the mediator between residents and the operating entity that's coming on board. Next slide. So I mentioned comprehensive repairs. I'm just going to kind of briefly buzz through a number of examples. So it's sweeping, right? It's not just, you know, aesthetics. It's not just facade work. It is stuff like sites and grounds and beautification and landscaping, of course, but also building systems, you know, boilers, pipes, domestic hot water, heat, roofs, windows, building facades, elevators, windows, security systems, lighting, and also very importantly, apartment interiors. So that means things like flooring, bathrooms, kitchen, common areas, painting, new doors, new fixtures, new cabinets, new finishes. All of this is, and I should also say capital repairs to community spaces, community centers, things like that. All of that is kind of part of the scope of a PACT project. So it all happens up once. It all happens through a process that's really driven by resident input. We very much require that the scope of all these projects address both the existing physical capital repair needs, but are also informed by a lot of meetings that any PACT partner that comes on board has to hold to get resident input on the shape of this rehab project. So the next two slides, Heather, if you want to move through them quickly, are just some larger format glossy examples of some of the work I'm talking about at sites that have gone through the PACT program. So you see a kitchen interior here on the left. Here's a courtyard space that was renovated up in the Bronx on the right, you know, based on feedback and charrettes and meetings with residents. They really wanted to focus on that, you know, the mural space, that outdoor seating space. If you go to the next slide, I could show that's an example of a different direction. Some outdoor landscaping space went into at another site in the Bronx. And then on the right here, you can see kind of this renovated building lobby, new expanded mailboxes, new elevators, a new bulletin board, new lighting. And I think really notably, as we've been hearing from a lot of the residents at our properties across East Harlem in your community district, is a more secure point of access, new lobby doors, key fobs, a secure lobby entrance, which is something you're seeing here that we're currently quite deficient in a number of our sites. So I mentioned, and John mentioned this at the top of the meeting too, that we emphasize that resident rights and protections remain very much the same for residents going through this program. So we've worked very closely with legal aid and NYCHA residents to create leases that ensure that all of these protections are in place, and there's a number of regulatory documents that ride with the properties at any of these PACT conversions that basically say the protections that residents have under the Section 9 program will be there for them in this new program. So rent is calculated at 30% of household income. That can't change. That is how it works today. That's how it will work through this program. There's still a right to organize. So tenant associations exist. There's still tenant association elections. There's still tenant association funding through this program. Automatic lease renewals will happen. So you're not renegotiating a lease year after year. That's how it works today. That's how it'll work through this program. And no one can be rescreened. So what we say by that is no one has to reapply for the Section 8 program. Residents that are in good standing on site today in a Section 9 building, if they're going through PACT, they're just going to be brought over, grandfathered over. They're not going to be screened out of the program. Quickly, you can still add relatives to leases. You can still pass an apartment on through the succession rights system that exists today. Residents have a right to grievance hearing the way that they do today. There's a conflict with a property manager or with NYCHA, and it's a federal program. It has federal money in it, so there are local hiring, NYCHA hiring requirements for the construction jobs, for the caretaking jobs, for the administrative jobs that come up through this program. These teams are required to do local hiring from the NYCHA properties here, and we do job fairs, job training as part of these programs. Next slide. This is a picture just citywide. Where is this program at? I mean, we're feeling very excited about this because it was a newer program, but now it's really started to be a proven citywide program across the entire city. We now have almost $4 billion of capital repairs either starting or totally completed, with another north of $4 billion of potential repairs in the planning and engagement stage. This is covering 138 developments across the city, more than 35,000 residents or units where residents are going to have these transformative changes. And overall, we're talking about almost $8 billion of total capital repairs we're able to access through this program, which we just do not see from the federal government in the Section 9 program. So on the next slide, we're zooming in on probably what I'm assuming you're most concerned about, what has been happening in Community District 3. So there's a number of projects in various states of activity in Community District 3. The last time I came and spoke to you, we just talked about the Jackie Robinson and Harlem Scattered Sites projects because they were just kicking off. But let me walk through what they all are here. So PACT projects usually happen or often happen in what we call bundles, where maybe a few buildings in a certain geographic area are moving through the program in tandem. So Park Avenue, East 122nd and 123rd Street, and 335 East 111th Street in your community district are part of an earlier round of PACT projects called the Manhattan Bundle. So they actually have construction underway and actually fairly close to nearing completion, which Heather will give an update on in a little bit. But all these other buildings, Robinson, Morris Park Senior Citizens Home, UPACA 5 and 6, Horsey Houses, they're part of a project called Jackie Robinson and Harlem Scattered Sites that's in much more of an early stage. The PACT partners are just coming on board there. Most of the work that's happened so far is early resident engagement that's really NYCHA led. And now the residents went through a process, resident leadership, of selecting a PACT partner who's just getting on site to start talking to residents about the shape of this work. That's a scattered site, which I'll get to in a little bit. Similarly, Wilson, that's its own project off on its own. And then White and Metro North Plaza, they're at a similar phase. There's a new PACT partner just coming on board at those locations. Next slide. So this is basically the list form of the map you just saw. So I won't dwell on it too much, but it just gives you a sense of kind of the timeline of where all these projects are at. So the first two I mentioned that are part of that Manhattan Bundle, they already have construction underway because they started their PACT conversion, as we call it, in February of 2021. The other buildings that I all mentioned are still in pre-development. They have PACT organizations selected, but that they're going to still go through all this resident engagement, all of these scoping meetings. They're having monthly or bi-monthly resident meetings as we speak, and they're not going to get to a plan for construction that will start until closer to 2023 or late 2023 or early 2024. So all in the lead up to that period, they're doing resident engagement and community planning around the shape and scope of the project. And in that time, NYCHA is still responsible for the management and operation of the property. It won't be until that later date when the new property manager takes over the day-to-day operations and the construction kicks off. Next slide. So Heather, do you want to just go through briefly what the status is? So this is the first two projects I mentioned where they actually have construction underway and there's kind of something more concrete to report back on at the moment.
Absolutely. And hi, everyone. My name is Heather Beck. I'm a senior advisor within the real estate department. So I work a lot with our leadership team to make sure we're, pushing forward some of our strategic priorities within the department, and do a lot of work with our other NYCHA departments. And I can give a quick overview. I just have 2 slides to talk through the Park Avenue and 335 East 111th Streets, give you some updates on the construction happening there. And like Jim said, this is part of a larger bundle that closed a number of years ago. And as you can see on this slide, we think construction is, just under 90% complete. And so they'll really start to wrap up punch list and final scope on all of the buildings over the next couple of months. And our anticipated construction completion date is December 2023. And if you've gone by the 2 sites that are in your district, I'm sure you've seen that it still looks very much so like an active construction site. And just to give another set of overviews for this project, we have Monadnock Construction as the developer, and Monadnock is also the general contractor. They have some subs that work underneath them. And then the property management company for all of the buildings within this bundle is Cornell Pace. And if there are any constituent issues or flags, we are always happy to coordinate and help share contact information for Cornell Pace. So if there's anything that comes up now or later, always feel free to reach out to, you talk with Brian Honan or our department directly. Okay, so let me pass along some construction updates. For 335 East 111th, we're about 85% complete with construction. And the photos that are on this slide, the top 2 photos, were taken today out at the site. So we have our construction consultants out there monitoring the work, making sure that they are kind of completing all of the final scope, especially when it gets to punch list items. And as you can see in the photos, they're doing a lot of the public corridor work now. So all of the apartment renovations and repairs have been completed. So residents now have, new kitchens, new floors, new cabinets. The apartments look really nice at that building. I've been into a few. And as you might know, the work is so comprehensive in nature that a few of the tenants in that building had to temporarily move so that they could do some real gut work and repairs, because that building was in pretty rough shape. There was a lot of work to be done in those individual apartments. So as they wrap up the corridor work, they'll also get outside this spring and summer and start to complete work on the playground there and all the other kind of sites and grounds at that building. And then Park Avenue is in a very similar spot. They are just finishing up the elevator modernization. You can see a photo of the new elevator there. And they're also doing some exterior sites and grounds improvements. They've replaced windows. They're almost completely done with the window replacement work, and they're kind of working their way through the final punch list. And one final thing I'll say kind of about these projects, and the same thing can be said about all of our projects during the construction phase, is that we know it's really hard to live in an active construction zone. You can kind of see, even in these photos, there's work happening in the hallways, So even if the work was done in your apartment months or years ago, the team still has to come through and kind of do the work in the apartment, do the work in the hallways, and that can be really tricky to live through. And I think it does take a lot of patience and coordination and communication between our partner teams and the tenants in the buildings, just to make sure things go well and they have access to the apartments, to common spaces. So we are very thankful for all the tenants who have kind of continually worked with the partner team at these different buildings in this site, and really across this whole bundle. This is a really big bundle and a lot of work to get through. And I'm going to stay on, and I'm happy to answer any questions about this project or any of the work that we do within the real estate department at NYCHA. And thanks again for having us. We like to pass along updates whenever we can.
Thanks, Heather. So the next batch of sites I'll report on, then I'll pass it off to my colleague Sam, who's also on the line with us. So Robinson, Upaka 5, Upaka 6, Morris Park, and Corsi are part of a larger bundle as well. It does actually include some additional buildings that are not in your community district, but they're all part of the same bundle. We call them the Jackie Robinson and Harlem scattered sites. You could see a map of where they are located across northern Manhattan on the screen here. A big focus of this work was to try to identify buildings where the management offices were really far away from the actual buildings, which was resulting in really big challenges to providing quality service on a regular basis. And having more localized management is one of the changes that will happen through this project. So this group of buildings went through a process over the summer where their resident leadership formed what we call a review committee, participated alongside NYCHA in the formal review of proposals. So they were partners in the procurement process, and they selected a group of partners to serve as the packed organizations on this project that are working as a team to provide the services that I mentioned earlier and get to that stage that Heather was able to just describe at a more advanced project. So there's a group of co-developers serving on this project. We have Via Development. They're really leading on this project in many ways, and they're working in partnership with Ascendant Neighborhood Development, a neighborhood-based not-for-profit, as well as McCormick, Barron, Salazar. They're kind of a joint venture development team. The contractor work here, so the actual construction work is going to be handled by L&M builders. And then the property management work, as well as some of the community engagement work that's happening currently, is also headed up by CNC, as well as with staff from L&M. Those are part of the same company. L&M is the development and construction wing. CNC provides property management. They're still not going to get ready to be, have like hammers in the ground or shovels in the ground, hammers on site doing construction work until probably late 2023, early 2024. There's a lot of resident engagement and design, design thinking happening right now. They're actively having resident meetings. This is the pre-development and resident engagement stage. They'll have meetings once a month, in some instances every 2 months, depending on the life cycle of the project. That's all to get resident feedback on what residents want to see through this process. I imagine I actually have seen or met some of you at some of the meetings so far. And at the same time, the team is doing some behind the scenes work that residents are also aware of because they're regularly noticed and communicated to via door knocking and phone calls about this, that's for in-unit inspections. So there's really a lot of environmental inspections and in-unit inspections that have to happen in this early stage for the teams to get a very clear sense of the scope of work that has to be done to comprehensively modernize these buildings. So that's what's happening now. That's what the current round of resident meetings is really focused on, getting residents ready for those environmental inspections and in-unit inspections that are happening at the moment. And that's really it. Happy to report back on future milestones, but they're going to be doing those inspections for the next few months and continuing to do scope of work, design charrettes and things like that with all of the resident associations and the larger resident bodies at each of these buildings over the summer and into the fall. So with that, I'm happy to pass it over to Sam.
Thanks, Jim. The first project I'd like to present on are the Wilson houses on 105th Street. This is just one development but it's in a similar stage as the Jackie Robinson and scattered site properties that Jim was describing before. They went through a similar process of procurement and developer designation. So the developers on the project are Hope Community Inc., which is a nonprofit, as well as Brisa Builders. The general contractors for this project are Apex Building Group, which is a minority and women business enterprise, as well as Gilbane Development Company. And then Shinda Management Corp., which is another MWBE, is the designated property management for the project. The timeline is similar to the Jackie Robinson project and is anticipated to convert in late 2023 or early 2024. Similarly, the current status is in pre-development and resident engagement. So we're just starting to hold monthly check-ins with tenant associations, as well as starting to have larger resident wide meetings to introduce them to topics such as environmental inspections, there's design sharets, and other issues impacting the shape and scope of these projects. They're also starting now the process of in-unit environmental inspections and those monthly meetings. Next slide. Close by project is Metro North Plaza and White. These are this is a bundle, but a smaller bundle of two different developments that is in the same stage as Wilson. In this case, the developers for the project are the Community Builders, a nonprofit developer, as well as the Ascendant, one of the developers on the Jackie Robinson, our own scattered site project. The general contractor for this project is MDG Design and Construction, and the property manager here is Wavecrest Management. This project is still in the same stage as Metro North Plaza and has an anticipated conversion date also in late 2023 or early 2024, and is in that pre-development and resident engagement status. So having monthly or bi-monthly resident check-ins, resident-wide meetings, and workshops in the same way they're being held across all these projects in the district. And with that, I will pass it back to Jim.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. So we're basically all here to answer questions you may have. I already see one in the chat that we can address. I also just want to point to you to, we have a general purpose packed website that anyone can visit for information on these projects or others, which you see on the screen here. We also operate basically hotlines, an email address, and a messaging service, basically, that you can call anytime to leave a message about any aspect of the PACT program or a specific PACT project. And we will have staff get back to you, fairly shortly, usually within 1 or 2 business days, to talk you through the question you have. I'm also going to just add here in the chat, although let me just make sure I can do this. Well, as we're talking and everyone has questions, I'm going to put in the chat that each of the PACT websites, or each of the PACT projects, the newer ones we just presented on, they have websites that are active currently that just kind of will show status updates, meeting materials, upcoming meetings, upcoming milestones, and they're all regularly updated. So that can be a resource for anyone to kind of track the progress of these projects, in between, say, appearances like this at the community board. I'll, of course, defer to the board on how to answer any questions, but I'm happy to respond to the one in the chat or, handle it any way you would like us to.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for the update. I have one question to start off. The resident involvement with these PACT construction projects, is it an overwhelming response, or is it like a small group of residents? What is the participation of residents?
So you're kind of concerned about, or you're asking about, when we're describing like a resident engagement meeting, what is the turnout looking like at those meetings?
Yes.
So I would say, I guess it does depend site to site, but I can certainly speak for my projects that I'm actively at, the Jackie Robinson buildings, we really have pretty good attendance, to be honest with you. It's, we're doing, so a lot of those buildings are senior buildings. So we're trying to tailor the meetings to the resident populations at those buildings. So with the guidance of the resident associations, at some locations, they've said, our residents want you to have the meeting at 11 a.m. Our residents want you to come back and do a second meeting at 5 p.m. If we're getting guidance from the resident association that that's going to help drive turnout, we'll cater the meetings to that. We're regularly getting at individual sites between 20 and upwards of 60 residents to some of our meetings. And these aren't necessarily very large buildings. Some of them are less, 200 or less units actually is about the average. So, getting out 20 to 60 households at a development like that, we consider to be, we're pretty satisfied with that. We're also doing some other touch points, I should say, lighter touch things like having tables set up from time to time at a designated posted hour in the lobby where people can do drop-in office hours, as we call them. Just trying to create different opportunities for residents that may not be available to go to a meeting to be able to interface with us about the status of the project.
Thank you.
Jim,
Okay, I see some hands raised. Candy? And keep it quick, please.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. It's very informative. So when you put out this RFP, how long did you put this RFP and when did it come out? That it's good to see that you do have some community-based organizations within East Harlem that have been selected to do the project. How did you do this, the marketing for the RFP, and for how long was that out?
Heather,
I can jump in. Yeah. So what we do each year, we have a multi-step process. So at the beginning of every calendar year, we release what we call an RFQ, a request for qualifications. And that goes out to a large pool of different entities. And we are looking for developers, general contractors, and property managers, along with social service providers, to join our list of pre-qualified entities. And we've done a lot of targeted outreach in the last couple of years to MWBE and nonprofit entities to join that list of pre-qualified partners. And the reason we want to create a list before we release any project-specific proposals, or what we call requests for expressions of interest, RFEIs, is so that we can share that opportunity with entities, organizations that we know are qualified to do the work. And there's kind of a basic threshold criteria that each organization has to pass to get on the list. And then it's up to the different pre-qualified teams or groups to form teams and submit a proposal to NYCHA for specific projects. So as an example, we had a list of pre-qualified providers. We have our list of pre-qualified providers. When we put out the RFEI for Wilson White in Metro North Plaza, that was shared with all of those companies. They participated in kind of a pre RFEI submission process where they learned more about the properties. They expressed their interests in submitting proposals once they formed teams. And then they enter kind of what Jim was talking about a little bit earlier, this resident review committee process where our residents are interviewing the different teams. They're looking through proposals with us and essentially helping NYCHA decide who will be responsible for the work and the property management of their development. And I would just say, when we receive proposals from project teams, we require that one of the developers on the project is either an MWBE or a nonprofit, and that they have a meaningful role. And we have a very specific definition of what a meaningful role is, and I'm happy to share that. But you can also find a lot of information on our PACT partner page, and I can put the link to that website or that web page into the chat, but it has our current list of pre-qualified partners and our current open RFEIs.
Okay,
And I
so,
hope- Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go for it.
My question is also that, was the community board, like, that information was shared with our district manager and the housing chair, so like that they would know that this was happening? While you were doing.
All of our RFQs are put in the city register, and we have to post public ads. And so that all goes through a formal procurement process and is notifications are posted there, which is what's required. And we can also, we can add you to our listserv if it's something you want to join, or you want to make sure that the community board is on.
Yeah, it would be nice that the whole community board knows, like, our district manager duly does provide information for the whole board to know what's going on in the community as well. And that will be a great way of outreaching and really putting out the word out there so everyone really knows what's going on. Not that it's just that we come and we hear you come and make that presentation,
Yeah, that's great. That's
the best way of actually doing marketing better.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and we tried to coordinate around that a little bit. I think we could definitely improve on that. But for example, we release these in rounds and there's successive rounds. And for the Jackie Robinson sites, actually around just before the RFEI came out, Angel did invite me to come speak. So at least on that one, we were able to connect on the timing to kind of say, hey, this is about to start. We're just starting resident engagement, and an RFEI will be released soon. So that was one instance where the timing worked out a little better, as you described. But we could definitely focus on that in the future.
Yeah, so everybody else can chime in as well.
Thank you, Candy. Dawn?
Hi there. Thank you, Chair. So I think I have some questions that are not going to be able to be answered during this time. I might have to send them through to you, but I just want to acknowledge that the chair had an excellent question about what you guys would consider significant participation, right? So full disclosure, some years ago, I ran the community engagement team for the Sandy recovery, right? So there's stuff I know that hopefully I think other people know as well, but we were very clear, or FEMA was very clear with us about what meaningful representation was. And when we started, the meetings were getting about 1% of the residents. And FEMA basically said that's not acceptable. And we had to do transcripts. We had a stenographer at every meeting, and we had to share what we had to be transparent about what we told residents. So, at the peak, we were getting 10% of the residents to our meetings, right? So anything less than that, I feel like is a failure to the residents. And I just want to, at some point in the future, understand what metrics you use, because just saying you did engagement and then checking a box is not democracy, I think. And I just want to be clear with the residents of this community board, what you consider to be winning, right? And so my question along those lines is, I worked on some properties in Far Rockaway, right? That was FEMA money, completely unrelated to this money, right? So I hope in the future you can start to distinguish between the two programs. But some of those projects, some of your earliest RADPAC projects were from, I think, 2012, 2013. That was 10 years ago. I haven't seen any success stories come out of that. I don't know if that's on your website or that's something that you want to start looking into. And then also I've been a little confused why there is a lack of transparency for residents and what the difference is between Section 9 and Section 8, right? So I've noticed that a lot of the tenant groups are very, very savvy and they know the differences. And so just to wrap it up, going forward, maybe I would like to know more about what you think is the right amount of participation by residents to make these really huge decisions. Two, do you have any success stories from projects that were, started 10 years ago? And I think I'll hold the other question for another time. I have a few other things, but I'll hold back on that.
I'm happy to speak to some of this at a higher level. Oh, Heather, do you want to, sorry.
I'll jump in on some of the prior
Okay.
conversations, and then, yeah, you can start with the resident review and resident engagement.
Yeah, so I guess, I know there was a few questions there, and Chair, please jump in if you want me to keep it short and follow up on this one-on-one, or, we're happy to answer this.
Definitely keep it short, because I know there's people on the call who have more questions.
So then the short version is that really our department, portfolio planning, is pretty specifically and directly tasked with running a lot of resident engagement and crafting resident engagement to very specifically make sure we're getting really robust participation and not just kind of checking that box, right? So I know I mentioned some attendance numbers, but attendance numbers aren't always, every piece of the puzzle. We do about a year and a half of resident meetings in the lead up to that procurement process starting that was just described earlier. And that's really just informational, because as you described, just a lot of the definition setting. What is the change from Section 9 to Section 8? What does the change in resident rights look like under the program? And largely they don't change. We do a lot of work on that, and we're very mindful of attendance, and we can report back attendance and participation as needed. We've really been mindful of trying to incorporate more interactive meetings into that, design charrettes, design workshops, things like that. And then once a PAC partner comes on board, there's really, it's beyond just a suggestion. It's definitionally a requirement of the program that they be meeting both a minimum expectation of HUD, desired resident participation and resident meetings, and then we push them significantly further on that. So you'll see across these projects, if you click on the website links, for example, that I provided, most of these teams are having monthly resident meetings at every single site that they're operating on. And we're trying to, in addition to that, also have some of those lighter touch points, lobby meetings, office hours, ways that residents can get involved outside of a virtual meeting and an in-person meeting, which are the two main formats with which we turn residents out month after month to relay this information. And in terms of success stories, I guess Heather is lightly flagging the slide to take over from me from there.
Yeah, and I would just add, I do think fundamentally we think resident meetings are one of many tools we use in our engagement. And Jim has really stressed the importance of these other kind of more frequent touch points that we have. And I would say our resident review committee process is a fundamental change in the way we identify and select the partner teams that are working with our residents. And really, they're the ones that are kind of leading the charge in those decisions, because they will work together long term, right? And it's good to have the residents kind of not be responsible, but be kind of at the table making that choice. So I just wanted to share, we did not have any PACT or RAD projects or conversions in 2012 or 2013. I don't think the program was fully stood up at that point. NYCHA's first PACT or RAD conversion was Ocean Bay. I think that construction completed in late 2017, 2018. That project did have some additional FEMA funding. And we do have a number of projects that have recently kind of come out of the construction phase, and we would say that they are complete. They are stabilized projects. And that's, a subset of the blue dots on this map. And we really do try to show our tenants and the residents who are in the pipeline and having conversations about this program, the success stories of the program, because they're the ones that are most directly impacted by the decision to, go through a conversion. And that is our main audience, right? We want to make sure that they can see the finished product. They can talk to the property managers that are at these projects. And that's been a focus of ours in the last couple of years, but we can certainly do a better job of sharing those successes outside of, our are groups that we're doing engagement and planning with. And we understand that that's an important part of the political conversation nowadays as well, given the conversations around Section 8 and Section 9. But I guess I'll try to leave it at that, and then we'll answer other questions.
Thank you, Dawn. And if there's any other questions that you have, I'm sure if you submit them to Angel, Maureen, or Khalid, they can forward them to Nigel. Beverly?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Nigel, for your presentation. It's a lot of information to unpack. My question to you is, in regards to the first slide that you showed where you have a certain amount of money that you was getting from the federal government and how much you needed. If under this conversion from Section 9 to Section 8, would you still be getting any of those fundings that the federal government get in addition to the money that you will be getting from as a conversion to the Section 8?
Yeah, it's a great question. So this is where it gets a little complicated, and I'll try to break it out a little bit. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is the funding for the traditional public housing program. That is the Section 9 program. That is what the majority of the NYCHA public housing units in our system are funded through. So what you're looking at on the screen here is only accounting for Section 9 public housing funding. So that is the Section 9 backlog, and that orange bar is the Section 9 funding. When the buildings that are going through the PACT program do what we call the conversion, and they change over to project-based Section 8, they're not going to get funded through that program anymore. They're going to get funded through a different federal program called project-based Section 8. In a number of ways, it's more robust. It allows us to make these comprehensive repairs up front, but a benefit to your point on the other side of things is that Section 9 money that we are getting can be reallocated to existing properties. So it is a way to help us across the board, balance our books a little bit more, so to speak, while basically delivering comprehensive repairs to as many locations as we can. The ultimate goal here is, we're desperately trying to provide a high quality of housing, stabilize our housing units, in the face of this underfunding. So it's using different tools at our disposal to make those repairs for as many units as we can.
Right, because when I was looking at your other slides when you were posting what buildings and what developments was being done, I wasn't sure, or you can probably tell me whether or not are all the buildings in that development being done and all the units in that development being done, or are you excluding some buildings or some units for any reason that you're doing it?
Could you skip ahead a few slides? I'll point to the specific. It is like one or two more forward. So one more, I think, or two more from here. Right, so this list where it's showing the capital funding for all these different buildings. So, individual units, or, if a development within one of these developments maybe has 3 buildings, we're not exempting individual units or, splitting the funding half Section 9 or half Section 8. The whole development and all of the buildings within that development on this list here go through the program. So it all goes through as one package. Everyone comes through the program. And when we show those capital repair numbers on the screen here, it is just an estimation, I should be very clear about. So what you're seeing here is every 5 years, NYCHA does an assessment of all of our properties. It's called a physical needs assessment. What would it take, based on our consultant's estimation, to bring those buildings up to good repair? So the numbers you see on the screen here are an estimation of the last time that was done in 2017. We know all the numbers on the screen have gone up since 2017. And that's why when a PAC partner comes on board, they must do comprehensive inspections of the properties to update this number, get a clearer sense of the capital needs, and a requirement of the program is to address those needs. So if anything, the figure you're seeing on the screen here is significantly lower than the kind of dollar amount of repairs that will ultimately be delivered as a requirement of these programs moving through the PAC program.
Okay.
I just want to add one thing to that, because I think it's a really important point.
Claudia, Beverly, were you finished?
No, I want her to add to that question if she can, please. Thank
Oh,
you,
sorry.
John.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a requirement. So that's not like a policy decision that we've made or just like part of the agreement that we have with a selected partner team. HUD requires that we redress every known capital repair need at each development that's funded to go through the program, so that you can't walk away or ignore part of a building or one of the buildings within a round. So just
Okay. All right. And my last two questions, and thank you, John. I just was reading an article regarding the eviction rates under these buildings. So I want to know how is the eviction has been higher since these buildings has been going under the PAC or RAD or whatever programs that changing to Section 8. And how can you keep the people that's in there? That's probably during the pandemic, lost funds or whatever. And are they getting the monies needed to become current so they won't be evicted? And my last question is regarding, this is Section 8. Most of the stuff that you change in Section 8 is most of the rights of the tenants is for residents that's already there. What is the applications that's being done for new tenants that come into this building? Are they straight under Section 8 and do they get the same rights as a Section 9 property, as if it was a Section 9 property? I yield to hear your questions and thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for those. Those are really good questions, and I'll try to do them quickly. I know there's some time constraints here, but I think the eviction question is one that we like to talk about and make sure we clarify and kind of daylight facts and some of the real data that we have from our different property management teams. And so the information that we have and the data that we collect on a monthly basis from our property management teams shows that there hasn't been an increase in evictions at our PAC sites after conversion. Part of that is because a lot of our properties converted during a moratorium, and so there just hasn't been any eviction movement kind of across the city at all for the past couple of years. And another part of that is because we require that our partner teams make housing retention and housing stability kind of a core tenet of their property management program. And we have a set of guidelines that they must follow and report to us every month on their activities. And essentially what they're doing is ensuring that any household who falls behind on rent is connected to resources or services in the community or through the property management team to help them kind of address the underlying issue for arrears and to address the actual arrear amount, any back owed rent, right? So there are usually a couple things that play into that, but we want to make sure, if someone's income changed, that they submit an interim recertification with NYCHA so that their rental will change. So they are paying less in rent every month. That doesn't help them resolve, any arrears that they might owe. But if we can connect them with HRA or another community program that's helping folks with rental arrears, that can help them resolve that with a property manager. Our property managers are also encouraged to enter into repayment agreement plans and a number of other steps that they can take to help resolve that. And if there are any eviction concerns around like tenancy and legal tenancy, there are some pilot programs that we can take households through. So all that to say very quickly, we really make sure that each household's unique circumstance is understood and that they are paired with the appropriate services and resources before any formal legal action is taken for that household. And there are some reports that have factual, real data from our property managers that we can share. One of them is from Enterprise Community Partners that has the most recent analysis of our eviction data. where they, kind of worked with us to make sure that they had the correct information. And then the second part of that is a great question. So the question was, what about households who join the Section 8 program after the conversion? And I would say there's a couple nuanced differences between a household who is currently a Section 9 tenant and transitions to the Section 8 program and a new Section 8 household. And one of them, one of the biggest differences would be that our Section 9 residents are not screened for their income. So if you currently live in a NYCHA building, you're a Section 9 tenant and you make $500,000 a year, you can stay in your apartment. There's no income ceiling, and you will transition into the Section 8 program. We're not going to screen you for your income. Any household who joins the Section 8 program has to qualify for the Section 8 program. So they have to qualify on an income basis based on their household size. And then there are some changes to the occupancy standards, which means how big of an apartment you can occupy based on your household size, that are different for new Section 8 tenants than our existing Section 9 tenants. But we maintain the same occupancy standards for all of our current tenants. We don't change it for the Section 8 program.
Yeah, I'm kind of concerned about that because I know based on how messed up the project, the housing has been, there haven't been a lot of applications approved to move into the projects. So if you have a large waiting list and you're doing this conversion, now these people who would have been there for an income or whatever their income, and they get 30% of their income, is no longer applicable to them because you have switched over to Section 8, which would, kind of make a lot of people not be able to afford to even move into the NYCHA housing that's available in our community.
Yeah, the NYCHA Section 9 and the Section 8 waitlist have been closed for a number of years. And I think that essentially is a product of our low vacancy rates and just how valuable of a resource, affordable housing is in the city. And once people move into the NYCHA community, they typically stay because they have a guaranteed affordable rent for their household. And one other note, just to add on that, when we do convert a property, so when Wilson converts to Section 8 in early 2024, we will open up a site-based waitlist for Wilson specifically. And so all of the current households on NYCHA's Section 8 waitlist will be notified of the opportunity to apply for the Wilson Pact property. And when there are vacancies, NYCHA is the one that administers the wait list and works with the property manager to fill those vacancies from the wait list. So there will be kind of like a site-specific list that's established for each project.
Thank you, Beverly. Dawn, and briefly on topic. I don't want to infringe on anybody's Tuesday any more than I have to.
Brief and on topic. It's on topic because I want to thank the presenter for correcting me that Ocean Bay, I guess, has only been online since 2017. So I want to clarify that. But so I want to tell you that in 2014, there were a number of presentations there and other developments, which I guess was starting early. But I guess my point, which I was just hinting at, is that the outreach has been lackluster. The outreach, instead of inspiring trust, has caused a lot of distrust. I think it's okay to say that we're going to do better, but we know how to do better. And we know that a vote of, only a handful of residents is not enough. So I guess I didn't want to come right out and say that, but I'm saying that, if you go back to the years when this started, you were very lucky that you got some tenant leadership on your side. But as you might imagine, tenant leadership is great a resource it is. It's not the entire development, right? And so I'm glad you're talking about creative ways to do better, but I think we're really going to have to accelerate any positive success stories that you have, because I've seen firsthand the engagement has been lacking. So just want to put that on the record so that you understand that I'm only hearing negative things over the last 10 years, right? And some of the newer TAs who were in full agreement with this have not yet experienced it. So that's why I brought that up. And Chair, thank you for letting me clarify what I was going to ask, and I will turn it back over to anyone else who has questions.
And just one thing to respond to that, thanks, Don. I do think we should mention, part of the trust legislation that was passed last year and will kind of come into play here at the end of 2023, most likely, is that all of our developments will now have a vote between, staying status quo, Section 9, moving into the trust, which is a similar but public option for Section 8, or moving forward with the PACT program. And there are a set of rules and guidelines around minimum engagement and minimum thresholds for voting. So I would encourage you to, sorry, my dogs are barking. I'd encourage you to take a look at that. It's on NYCHA's website.
Okay, so some of their tenant rights groups have said that those groups are not going to be representative, and they include people who maybe shouldn't be making the decision on behalf of the whole development. So yeah, I'm happy to look at whatever, if you want to point me in the direction. But as you might be aware, the information that the residents are getting, or the rest information that I'm getting, does not say that it's going to be representative. But again, if you have real numbers and stuff like that, please point me in that direction.
Yes, we'll do.
Thank you. Diane?
Thank you, John. Okay, so I am going to reiterate everything that you're saying, Don. Outreach is, to me, and I'm sure that most of the people on this call, is critical in this whole operation. And I want to drive that home to NYCHA so that you understand it and take it back. This is not just a check mark, as you said, Jim, earlier, that you're not doing it as a check mark. But clearly, it's wonderful that you're coming in with these structural improvements, but there are also other issues within NYCHA and also other buildings as well that are going under renovation. And I think you need to hear from the community as to those other issues, quality of life issues, the gun violence issues, the CCTV, all of those things need to be part of this conversation. And if they're not included, then when are they going to be included? It's one thing to fix up and give us a nice new kitchen and give people a nice new walls. It's another thing to change the way that they are living. Okay, and I want to drive that home. The second thing I have to say is in who is doing the outreach? Are they going to be people that look like me and Candy and most of the women and men on this call? Or is it going to be, people just coming from NYCHA's offices? It's very important that whoever comes can relate to the people, to encourage them, as Dawn says, to really participate. I don't think most of the people on this call know how I am. I truly believe a decision of this magnitude should not be made by 10 people. It should be made by at least a good significant percentage of the people who's going to be impacted by it. The third question I have is, if their people have to move, where are they put? And do they have the option to come back? I'm sorry, I just threw it all at once.
Jim, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, why don't we
on
try
the
to
engagement?
go through, and I'm sorry if I'm being brief. I'm really happy to have follow-up conversations about any of this. So in terms of the kind of topics of both the meetings that have been happening to date, both NYCHA-led engagement prior to a PAC partner being involved, and then the monthly meetings that happen once a PAC partner is involved, and the topics that are covered and the scope of work of the project. They actually very much do focus on a lot of those areas that are non-structural, as you put it, right? The questions about security plans, questions about social service planning, things that might be considered both like safety issues, but also quality of life. That's really part of the PAC scope, in addition to the structural improvements that are mandated as part of this program. So we require that these teams come in and work very closely with residents to develop detailed, tailored, catered security plans that work for these residents. And as we've mentioned, a majority of the buildings that we're working on with the residents very closely with in East Harlem are senior buildings, right? Which kind of adds an additional level of security needs, of social service needs, of health assistance needs. So those pieces of the puzzle are funded through this program and are actually actively part of the discussions and meetings. So we're not just engaging residents on the physical scope of work, but also a plan around security and a plan around social service needs. Really, we're trying to model, a comprehensive program that goes beyond just the bones of the buildings, and is getting back to kind of a level of service in terms of security and social service planning that people may remember from an earlier era of NYCHA, but has really suffered because of lack of funding. There was a question about the moving process, and I'm sorry I'm forgetting one of the questions. I was trying to take notes as we went. So the emphasis of the program, the goal of the program, is to do what we call tenant in place rehabilitation, meaning the goal of the construction plan at each site is to do the work in a very non-disruptive way as much as that's possible when you're completely rehabbing an apartment, and that residents can stay in their apartments as the work happens. There's a really detailed plan for safety, for protecting residents, personal belongings and things for how that process works. But there are also sometimes exceptions to that. As you can imagine, if there's work being done that would expose a resident to hazardous materials, of course, some of our older buildings have lead paint that could be disrupted as part of this process. Sometimes residents just have asthma, right? Personal discomfort with the work that's happening. We do allow or even necessarily need to do what we call temporary moves if there is an environmental risk or it's a preference of a resident to be relocated. It's not just an option to go back to the apartment, it is a required right to return. So anyone that's temporarily relocated as part of this process has a right to return to their original unit. That's just a basic factor of the program, or fact of the program. But the specific way that plays out ultimately really depends on the inspection work that's happening now. Is there hazardous material in the apartment? Is there a level of construction work that would require a temporary move? And in the case that there was, a very specific individual plan on the household to household level gets worked out with those residents to ensure that it accommodates their needs and accounts for their safety and comfort. I'm afraid I feel like I'm missing a question. Heather, did you catch another one? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
just
I
basic-
think the
yeah.
comment. Oh,
I basically asked, who is the outreach team? Are they going to be representative of the people that
Sure.
they are obviously going to try to
yeah.
work with, or are they just NYCHA people
Well,
that come from
It's a little bit
headquarters?
of a yes and. NYCHA staff is certainly involved, and a number of NYCHA staff are involved. Well, Heather, do you want to, maybe you can give like the overall view since you're involved with.
Sure. Yeah, I think the answer, that's right, Jim. So we do have NYCHA real estate staff to meet with our tenant associations. We do a lot of the project management. It is a large real estate transaction, and a number of the members of our team have backgrounds in that, kind of like the nuts and bolts of the housing finance transaction, so to speak. We also work very closely, kind of hand in hand every day with our, they changed their department name a lot, resident engagement, resident outreach for comprehensive services department. And a large number of the staff members on that team are NYCHA residents. A lot of, I'd say all of our staff are New Yorkers. And what we've also done in the past couple years is really increase the amount of assistance that we're providing our tenant association boards and our resident review committees, so that they have kind of a third party, non-NYCHA technical advisor that they can turn to and ask questions and kind of like level set information with that's, you know, it might come from NYCHA, but they don't trust us. We understand. Somebody who understands the housing and affordable housing and development landscape, but isn't a NYCHA staff, essentially. And we call that group our PACT resource team. And essentially, it's a group of consultants that the residents can pick and work with throughout the planning and pre-development phase. And they come from a number of different backgrounds. Some of them have planning backgrounds, some of them are advocates and organizers, some are, you know, legal representation and legal teams. Some of them have backgrounds in government but are kind of independent consultants now. And we've been really trying to pair our resident leaders with, you know, individuals and organizations in the community to support the planning work, in addition to our, you know, project management of the engagement process. Because I think we understand the limitations of that and the historical mistrust and you know, the reasons behind that. We are always open to ideas for how we can bring in additional voices and resources to our planning process. And I think that's something we value deeply. So, you know, we're all ears if you want to share more.
And I should also add that, I mean, this goes back to a little bit of the, you know, the requirement that an MWBE or a not-for-profit, who often end up in practical terms because they're pre-qualified organizations, it's often organizations that have a close tie to the neighborhood. And of course, when those organizations are selected and are playing an active role in pre-development, running meetings that are resident facing alongside NYCHA staff, I mean, you often have a neighborhood nonprofit or an MWBE firm literally in the room running the meetings because we require that they be on these projects in a meaningful role. So there's a few different ways we are trying to address and speak to the very concern that you're bringing up. It's certainly top of mind, and we're all ears on how to further improve that.
Thank you. Thank you, Diane. Claudia?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, John. I just want to say that Section 9 is true traditional public housing, and it's for moderate to low and very low income persons to live there. Section 8 is not public housing. Section 8 is low income housing, and it's not under the public housing stock. What is happening is Section 8 is they're doing the conversions to complete the Section 8. So I need people to understand that. As a NYCHA now, as it seems, NYCHA is now like the representative said, it's going to be oversight, which is kind of disturbing, being with the relationship of NYCHA and the residents when we're trying to get HUD to give NYCHA oversight. Now NYCHA is now doing oversight for management companies. That's something I just wanted to state. A question is, what are you guys doing when the conversion happens and construction is already in place? Because when the new management company comes in, everybody who's there, including the management office, leaves the property. So if there's a, for example, roofing going on and the conversion happens, this is hypothetical, and the conversion happens, right? So now, is the roofing completed? And if it's not completed, where is the funding that wasn't used for the completion of the job going? That's one thing that I would like. Another thing, that I realized with these conversions in the lease agreements, it clearly states that the head of household must be 18 years or older. What's happening to the emancipated people, children, youth? Not only that, we know that some head of households can range from 16 to 18-year-olds. What are we doing about those households?
But those are, oh, I'm sorry, Claudia, were you done?
Yeah, we just want to know what are we doing for those who are under the age of 18, for those conversions?
Yeah.
Also, I had it written down. Give me 1 second. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that for now. Okay, I yield back the floor.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say I don't know the exact answer to your question about the 18-year-old and under, if somebody's emancipated and if they can remain as a head of household. And I think those are unique household circumstances, but I can try to find the answer to that for the Section 8 program, and I would love to just share that with the board once I know. But thank you for flagging that. I think that might be the first time I've heard that question. And then the other question you said was a hypothetical question about ongoing construction at a PAC site, but it is actually something that we have to coordinate all the time. Maybe not at all of our projects, but there are ongoing capital repairs, some of them larger scopes, some of them smaller, at a number of our developments. And we have to coordinate internally, one, to either not start a project right before a conversion. So, we wouldn't start a roof replacement project at Wilson this summer, knowing that we're about to convert the property to a different partner team in early 2024. So some of that has kind of long-term planning conversations that we have to have internally. And then there might be work that's at a development that is ongoing. Maybe it's been happening for years. And typically either NYCHA will complete that scope or complete it before the conversion, or the property manager and the general contractor as part of the PAC team will finish the work. And it really depends on what the scope is and where the work is taking place. But we would never leave something half completed, let's say, or we definitely wouldn't start a project, a capital repair project, prior to a conversion once we knew the development had, some long-term pipeline plans. And I think that kind of answers the question, but I think it really depends on the work that's happening at the development.
And I don't know if I was catching it. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Does that also apply? Because we also know that we have particular developments that have been allocated funding, either through city council, through the assembly, or even the congressman to do certain things. Does that money still come to the development? What's going on with that? Like, if, for instance, let's say I'm gonna just throw another example out there. Okay, I'll use the rooftops again. We know that there's a list out there of roofs from money from the de Blasio administration that was dedicated to particular developments. Now, let's say this development hasn't restarted the work, or they go under the conversion. So do they still stay on that list for the new roofs through Section 9, or during the conversion, does all that put it to a halt and leaves it to the management company to overtake that responsibility?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say part of this is kind of going back to that, or maybe I can go back to the graph slide and thinking about the limited resources we have. And so if a building is slated to have a roof replacement, but we know that development is going to go through the PACT program, we will not start that work because the scope within the PACT comprehensive repairs that happen through the PAC program will address that roof repair need. And we need to make the smart financial decision, having such limited resources, to allocate those funds to a different property, right? And so if there's, a $50 million that's set aside to do work at one development, but that work can be completed by a different general contractor and not use our limited funds, we'll make sure that it's taken care of through the PAC scope and not through under the Section 9 program. I feel like I kind of missed that a little bit, but I think what we're trying to do at all times is make sure that we're really allocating our funds where we should be and not duplicating or potentially duplicating work or allocations. And that's what we have to do as a city agency. And some of those are tricky conversations that we have to have with city council members if they wanted to put a certain subset of dollars towards windows or AC repairs in a community center. They can still distribute those funds, but it doesn't make sense for it to go to any of that capital repair work. Sorry, Jim, if you're gonna jump in.
No, I mean, I was just gonna emphasize that essentially all that you're describing is formally something that actively gets worked out in the pre-development phase, right? Like this is actually a matter of handing a property off, making decisions between NYCHA and the incoming partner about, who is handling what scope of work, how far along the progress of a certain project was, who dedicated certain funding to what, and really coming to terms clearly. All of the repairs must get done one way or another. So we're actively in the process of working that out now, as Heather described. But the sort of bottom line piece of it is that there's no world where you can get around making the repairs. So whether it ends up being funded because it was, an 85% completed project by NYCHA and that goes through as a NYCHA project, or it didn't even get to construction start under NYCHA and it's going to be passed off to the new construction company. There's no world where the repair just gets tossed aside. The residents must get the repairs as part of the program, and NYCHA kind of works with the new company to go back and forth and figure out who's inheriting or not inheriting what parts of the scope of work so that there's a clean transition. And at the day of conversion, the team knows exactly what work they are picking up. And that includes oftentimes even closing things out, like a number of work tickets that didn't get completed for minor work, right? For things that fall short of a major capital project, the new property manager will inherit work tickets that were maybe started on a Monday and the conversion's happening on a Wednesday. That work didn't get done. That team is inheriting those tickets and completing that work, and that's all transitioned over in a very coordinated and formal way.
And thank you very much. And to finish this off, Xavier.
Thank you very much, John. And thank you to our committee members at the Housing Committee, to the public. Heather, Jim, thank you for being with us tonight. Shame we didn't have Brian here. I've known him quite a long time. As I said, I enjoy his company because he's very good at drawing it out in crayon, as I say, because I have a 6-year-old and 9-year-old. So there are a couple concerns, because I think it would have been very helpful to have him here for continuity of the conversation when it comes to NYCHA. And my dad grew up in the Millbrook houses. He's a product of public housing, and as you've probably been privy to many of our conversations, you draw a circle around the South Bronx, Upper Manhattan, all the way to East Harlem, you have the highest concentration of public housing on the planet. That's point of fact. The issue we have dealt with when we actually had a public housing forum back, I think it was 2016, when it was first Houses On, and dealing with this is the disinvestment. And our greater concern, if you read between the lines, is this conversion, and this is why it's not alarms and excursions, to quote Shakespeare. There's a real concern here, is the long-term impact in the conversion. that once you do that, it becomes a slippery slope into the privatization and then the acquisition of public lands and properties. And it's not dissimilar to when you deal with the short-term constructs of when we all went, when people go to college. You're there for 4 years, you try to make change, they wait you out. But we're seeing the real life impact of this for people's lives, generation upon generation. It's just extrapolated over a generation versus 4 years. So I think and to kind of bring it into those simple terms, our concern is the oversight mechanisms, the return. And so a few questions I have, and again, this is not to disdain what you're presenting here. I want to make it accessible to everyone. And the sense is, have you had, and my questions are, have you had any non-success stories, right? People who've complained, because we've had people come to us. You've heard some of our committee members register about outreach, and I can say, I personally had my ear turned up by others wondering what's going on. So we appreciate and applaud you for being here, so that there's no upset on my part. That's why we're public servants, although volunteer. Have you had issues with conversions and the residents are not happy? I'd like to hear about that. And then if you haven't heard about that, what would be your strategy in dealing with that? And then to announce to the public again, once you've converted, is there a path back? Because again, we know this is all about disinvestment from federal dollars. That's really what it is, which has led us to this compromise. So if we could answer those two, and then I have one follow-up.
Sure. Thanks for your comments. And agree. It's great to have an evening with Brian. And I'll pass on your note. And I appreciate all your concerns and your questions. So I'll try to get to the question about kind of NYCHA oversight and control, and then our ability to learn lessons essentially from our earlier conversions, and what we've been able to learn from projects when they go well and when they don't go well, or when we, don't do the engagement right, and the changes we've made. I think fundamentally, when we do a Section 8 conversion, so we're converting the funding stream and we're relying on our private partners to partner with us to do the work. It's really the only tool we have, right? But I think I can pull the other slide back up, but like we have not found another way to give each of the buildings in our portfolio the work that to fund the work that needs to happen at that building. And we don't have all the time to wait to do the work. The longer we wait, the more expensive it becomes. And, the conditions that people live in, it's not acceptable. And I think our residents that come to us and ask kind of directly for the PACT program have a real sense of urgency and desire for change, both so that there can be a capital investment in their property, and for their property manager to be maybe more responsive, for the property manager to have more funding and the ability to respond to things in a way that NYCHA is just unable to right now. And so I think that's the benefit of this program, is that we are actually able to respond to those really dire needs, and also respond to things like abating lead. These are really severe health conditions that people, are living in. And so we're using this tool, particularly at developments where folks have asked us to kind of bring this as an option. And the contracts that we sign are 20-year contracts. For the Section 8 program, they are renewed indefinitely for funding purposes. But one of the things that Jim had shared earlier is that we retain ownership of the land. We're really entering a ground lease and an agreement with the property manager, developer, general contractor to develop on or to deliver on a set of deliverables. And that has to do with the construction phase of the work, but it also has to do with the long-term financial management of the property and the property management of the building. And so they can't just do the construction work and not perform as a property manager. We can step in and replace them at any point. And all of that is codified in our legal and control agreements. They are required to meet certain benchmarks in terms of their property management response to repair tickets and in their financials. So NYCHA retains that in perpetuity. We will always have that option to take back ownership, property management, replace a team, and really respond to the conditions at the site, whatever they are.
Okay.
And so that's part of that. Oh, sorry. And then I think part of our team and the work that we've been doing for the past couple of years is really learning from some of the early engagement mistakes that were done by the housing authority. The housing authority used to come up with a plan and make a press release and tell everyone, that they were in the next round, without ever having a conversation with them first or talking to them about the benefits and the trade-offs of the program and making sure that that was the right fit for the community. And our engagement approach now is really to talk through decisions, make sure that the tenant association board and the residents at large understand, proponents of the program and that we're all kind of walking together in the process. It's a long engagement process and it's one where we will follow the direction of our tenant leaders at every step. And I think there are a number of projects that have started and stopped over the past couple of years because of our commitment to that, to follow the lead and discretion of the TAs, which is also, kind of the requirement of NYCHA, right? Like we have to engage with our tenant association leaders.
Okay, and I appreciate that. And we do have attorneys on our board, and we had made the request previously about getting the boilerplate language for.
It's on our website.
Oh, great. Would you pop it in the link, that language, so we could review it? Because that is a concern and being able to roll back. But as Brian had shared, once it's enrolled and the conversion's done, there's no going back. And there's one carry year fiscally when it comes to the requests to the federal government for financing. And you have that one carry and then it falls off. So that's something that we have to keep in mind when that conversion happens. So there's no walking back. The other component when it comes to this function of tickets that you've raised, and I think this would be very important for our board to have a walkthrough within our community, because the one question that was not answered is, have you had any conversions that were not successful, where tenants have reported back to you, or if it has not gotten to you? I'm sure we could elevate that if, and I know some have raised their concerns. And how have you handled that?
Yeah.
So just to be clear, sorry, Heather, go ahead.
You can jump in.
Oh, I was just going to emphasize that there's kind of two pieces of the walkthrough question. So one is that a number of residents in your community that have gone through this process did go on a series of site visits and walkthroughs to completed sites throughout the city. One of the challenges about doing this in East Harlem is that map I showed earlier. And just what we've gone through tonight is there's no completed projects in East Harlem. And in fact, construction hasn't started at the majority of the projects and won't until likely early 2024. So Heather, I know we've done things with the visits to other sites, but I just want to be clear about the active or inactive, early lack of activity, so to speak, at the East Harlem sites, other than the two Manhattan Bumble buildings.
And just sorry, Jim, to interrupt. I just want to be clear. In 2017, there was a site visit in what is now Council District 8, where they were doing a conversion. I don't have the housing development on hand, and they were mid-conversion. I think it'd be helpful
Gotcha.
for a lot of the board members here, especially those that who may have mobility issues. Midstream is fine. They should be able to see that. It's important for our committee members to witness midstream to completion, so they can wrap their heads around it. So
Sure.
that just interject that.
I see Dawn mentioned it might have been a visit to compost 1 and 2, which I guess we should also clarify was not a packed conversion. It was an earlier program that used a similar mechanism, but a big feature of which would a big piece of what was missing there was the very component that you're pointing out here, like the really robust resident engagement and the long pre-development process that really incorporated resident feedback into the whole design scoping. So a kind of perfect example of lessons learned, actually, that really was like a proto-packed program. A major renovation, comprehensive renovation of a property. The quality of work was good, but I think a major lesson learned there was there wasn't really an active role for much of the resident body. And there wasn't buy-in and ownership necessarily over all aspects of that project. And that's something we've really actively tried to change and prioritize in the PACT program, kind of as a lesson learned from that earlier round of conversions, which was called Triborough Preservation rather than PACT.
Okay, thank you. And increase, you really, and again, as other members have echoed, I'm going to kind of summarize real quick. We may have additional questions. I'm going to hand it back to John. I must implore you, the outreach, when it comes to voting and everything, it must reach a greater threshold than what we are now. It's important. So if you could elevate that and make sure you're doing that, it will ensure a greater success. If that is what the tenants desire, we will do our due diligence. Ultimately, I've seen firsthand when I have dealt with the dysfunction of NYCHA, and it is done and dealt with the decentralization, and back again, where I literally walked into neighbors and friends' apartments here in this city when all they needed was plumber's tape around their sink to stop it leaking. And it took 2 months to get that to happen. That's dysfunctional. And I'm a union guy, and I can tell you straight up, a lot of this is into the organizational management and stuff that could be easily fixed internally from NYCHA's perspective versus going out into this other methodology. So that's all I'm going to share with you. Just a simple guy, did construction to put myself through college. So there you go. Look forward to meeting in person. Appreciate you, John. I'm going to hand it back to you. Thank you for your patience, everyone. I value all of the individuals in this meeting. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Thank you, Xavier. Arlene, I had to move from my laptop to my tablet. Are there any other hands raised?
You have Beverly with her hand raised. I'm not sure if it was an old hand, and you have one hand in the attendee section.
Okay, Beverly, brief and to the point.
Yes, thank you, John. To piggyback off of what our chair has spoke, Xavier, regarding NYCHA. Now that you have the money under the Section 8, my question is, before the transferring to the Section 8, you don't have the funding. Now that you will get the funding through the Section 8, why are you passing this management over to a third party? Why aren't you doing it? Because I'm concerned, like, if they're going to be managing, what's going to happen with the management offices that you have on NYCHA now, where people go in and pay their rents or make work order sheets? What happens to the workers there? And then also what happens to the staff of the NYCHA workers who cleans up and stuff like that, if this is all going to a third party? So my question is about the staff that you have now and what's going to happen to them. And why aren't you, if you're getting the money, why aren't you guys doing the management now that you're going to get the money and do what's needed and have a better system, as Xavier's expressed, that will work even better, because now you have the funding.
Yeah, great questions. So let me try to get to it briefly, and I can definitely follow up as needed one-on-one. So a key piece of this program, and this was created under the Obama administration, this is a function of how the program works. We have to dispose that responsibility for managing the property to another party to get that funding. right? That is a requirement of the program. We cannot get that subsidy. We cannot get that funding. We cannot get approved for a PACT conversion unless it involves that transition to a private or not-for-profit or third-party management entity. So that's actually a condition of getting the funding. It's not an option to keep management in-house and get the funding through this particular program. In terms of what happens to the actual staff, also, incredibly important question, and one with which we work very closely, of course, with our management and operations staff in this transition and lead up. So staff that work there now, NYCHA operations, caretaking, management staff, they don't lose jobs. They don't get laid off in this process. There is going to be relocation for staff. Typically, the way that it works is a relocation to another NYCHA site in the Section 9 program. Usually one that's closest to the zip code where that resident or where that worker actually lives. Typically, additionally, the management company that comes on board, they have to do a lot of hiring. They certainly do outreach to staff about the option to stay on that location. Some individuals may have the preference to stay in that location. What we do find is when that job is offered to stay on location, sometimes younger staff take up the new management company on that opportunity, but a lot of senior staff at NYCHA properties have accrued a lot of pension contributions, a lot of service time, and they want to stay with NYCHA to continue accruing those benefits, having them vest. So they'll take the relocation instead of accepting a job with the new management company. But that's basically how it's handled at a site-by-site basis.
My last question is regarding the programs that you have on NYCHA residents, especially people that if you want to be start your own business, or if you want to learn how to do maintenance and stuff like that, would those programs still be intact for the NYCHA residents that's there now, or the ones that may come in after the conversion as new residents?
Yeah, that's another great question. Yeah. And so part of the social service component of the PACT program is that we, one, will make sure that the on-site organizations that are providing services stay at the site. So that's part of that. And our Section 8 tenants, maybe they were formerly Section 9 and they transitioned to Section 8, maybe they're new Section 8 households, they continue to have access to the NYCHA REIS office, which is the resident economic
Education.
Yeah, it's I should know it off the top. REES, right? So they oversee the Section 3 program. They oversee different training and workforce development programs. They have a new program that's available in the Section 8 program that's not under Section 9 called Family Self-Sufficiency. So we make sure that there are linkages and referrals, and that people, especially if they're already enrolled in a program, continue through the REIS team, or through the social service provider who's on site, continue to be referred back to NYCHA for those opportunities. But that's a critical part of the program. And we talk a lot about the building repairs because it's kind of the main show, but we really try to boost on-site services and programs as much as possible.
This will also be funded through the money that you're getting under them being converted to the Section 8.
Yeah,
it's
written into the deal, so it's part of the underwriting. It's part of the debt that they take out for the building. Essentially, like they are guaranteeing funding on a per unit basis for services and programs. So not just in theory and concept, but really kind of hardwired into the program.
And in terms of the way that gets designed, I want to emphasize that that's a key piece of this pre-development phase we're entering into. There's a number of meetings that are happening over the next few months where we're going to be doing project scoping, right? And that's not just physical. It's also talking about what services do you have now? Are they working? Are they not working? What did you used to have? What are you missing here? What would you want to see retained and what would you want to see added? So we're really engaging residents pretty deeply, both in the meetings and in additional one-on-one outreach in a number of methods, surveys, other points of contact to say that that piece of the puzzle, is as important to us in the scoping out of these projects as figuring out the physical repairs. So it's really is actually very much what's to come in the next few months for the residents at the East Harlem Pact sites.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Bill. Marlene, there's still another person with their hand raised?
No, they put it back up. So it's Cynthia that she's lowering and raising her hand. So Cynthia, if you can speak, John is giving you the floor.
Oh, yes, thank you. I had a quick question in regards to the income. I'm not sure if I heard you correctly. You stated that as a Section 9 tenant that stays, and if, let's say, the NYCHA converts to whatever management company is given, they will still continue to pay 30% regardless of what the income and family size is. So for example, if I'm a family of 2 and I'm making, let's say, 65,000 to 70,000, would I still be paying 30% of that, or would it change the AMI?
So the 30% is a percentage of your gross household income. So the rent is calculated as a 30% of the gross income that household earns. 30% is how the rent is calculated. Now, if that $60,000 or $70,000 a year, as you described, let's say someone loses a job and that goes down to $30,000 a year. Recertify your income, the gross household income goes down, and the rent goes down. Let's say that household is making $70,000 and it goes up to $110,000. You also have to recertify your income and recalculate the rent as 30% of that increased income. So the rent level can change, but the percentage remains a 30% calculation of the overall household income.
Okay, and that's a guarantee, because that's not necessarily a Section 8 rule, correct?
Very much so, right? So that's a key piece of the PACT program, right? Section 8 does have some instances where there are different ways rent is calculated, different ways household composition can be calculated. But I mentioned this earlier and it was probably a little too brief, but if you're a Section 9 resident and you transition over into this program, there's certain terms attached to your lease, certain rights and protections that you have as one of those PACT converted residents. That means your rent's going to remain calculated the same way. So we do have sometimes Section 8 residents that are paying more than 30% of gross household income in the traditional Section 8 program, but that wouldn't be the case for a resident that converted through the PACT program.
Okay, understood. Because I had the privilege of interning at Batanzas Houses and with Catholic Charities, who was the first one to convert, and Wavecrest. And I was there for a couple months, and I saw firsthand the confusion with the tenants that didn't have the opportunity to vote, tenants that couldn't afford. Their income was over the income for Section 8, and were forced to pay market value rent. And Catholic Charities had to do what they do, and they find funding and whatnot to help those tenants that are now stuck paying market value rent.
There are some nuances to our older projects where there are households that weren't Section 9 households prior to the conversion. And sometimes those unique instances pop up, and I don't know the specifics for the households that you're speaking of, but if they were, if they did convert from Section 9 and they joined a Section 8 contract, they would continue to pay that 30%. But I think, there are some different portfolios within NYCHA's larger portfolio that kind of there are different unique circumstances given the households. But I think for the most part, we don't have any developments with those like LL1 or LL2 type of unique circumstances.
Okay.
It's confusing. It's also confusing to me because there's like little pockets within some buildings. It's a small subset of households, but they have, they should have connection to resources to help explain that to them. And I would hope that the Catholic Charities or the Batanzas property management team.
Well, they did, and that was under the preservation, so I understand that it's different. I just wanted clarity in terms of, because my development is Washington Houses, and we're not on that list. And the tenants that I've spoken to don't want to be. They want to remain Section 9. And one of the fears is the income. You know, a lot of people are working people, and we're not, some people are not low income, or we might be moderate income, and that could change. It could go up. Of course, everybody wants to make more money, but at what expense? Like, we want to make sure that we stay at that 30%. And like when we know our lease, if it's a new management company, that, you know, we can afford to live here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in the most, you know, straightforward way to think of it is, if you're converting from Section 9 to Section 8, you will be a part of the program where you have the 30% calculation for your total household income. There are some of these very unique circumstances. And I would say one of the things that we have learned, even after the Betances conversion, is how important it is for tenants to have access to free legal resources, and while they're signing their leases or before. And so we make sure that residents are able to call and ask questions and kind of have someone to talk to about their very household circumstances, so that they can understand what's, you know, what type of situation their household might be in. But I think that it's a good flag that you raise, and I'm sorry I don't have all the specifics for the Betances conversion kind of top of head.
Okay, that's okay. You answered my question for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Marlene, are there any other hands raised?
No, there aren't any hands raised.
John and Marlene, I know we're running late. Would that be okay if I made a very brief comment?
Sure.
I'm sorry to jump in like that. I basically just want to emphasize to everybody that there were a lot of questions that came in about the resident engagement process and what it looks like in the early stages of a PAC project. So it is early at all of the projects in your community district, except for the 2 buildings in the Manhattan bundle. And I want to be really clear. It's really me and Sam, more than anybody, on the ground from the real estate team. Now, that's not the extent of all of the staff that are doing outreach and all of the different organizations that are doing outreach on these projects. But we're really out there, especially, you know, at the Jackie Robinson sites. I'm on the ground at resident meetings, at TA meetings, at office hours, at lobby meetings, multiple times a week, every week for the last year and a half. Resident leaders have my cell phone number. Residents have my cell phone number. Residents all know my face because I'm leading all these meetings. We are really trying to have robust resident engagement before the development planning even starts. So I'm talking about, you know, before the design. We haven't even started having the design questions yet. But that being said, we take very seriously everything you're pointing out about, you know, ways we can improve engagement, maybe particular buildings where the strategies that I'm working on are not getting through for whatever reason to residents. We continue to evolve how we do this. We continue to add different outreach methods, you know, in addition to phone calls, in addition to door knocking, in addition to lobby visits, in addition to office hours, in addition to resident meetings. We're really all ears, me specifically, because I'm working on these projects. And I'm really in charge of overseeing the way that PAC partners do their engagement, and they're responsive to me. So I'm open, you know, if you have specific things you've heard about at specific buildings, specific shortcomings at specific buildings, specific meetings where you think it could have gone differently for X, Y, and Z reason, I'm really all ears to hear those specifics, because it's my job to implement that plan. So any communication you want to flow through the PAC hotline to me about, you know, unique conditions or concerns or challenges around engagement that you've heard from Robinson, UPACA 5, UPACA 6, Morris Park, et cetera, please filter those to me. I'm sure Sam will emphasize the same thing. It's our job to improve on this. So, you know, I want to emphasize it's not a closed door. Give us that feedback. You know, we want to improve this process for the residents going through it. And also, thank you for all your time tonight. I don't want to end without also saying that. Before I was at NYCHA, I worked at Community Board 3 in Lower Manhattan. I truly understand the commitment that you're all, you know, putting in on these. So I appreciate everyone's time and letting us run a little bit long.
Okay, Sam, Heather, Jim, thank you for appearing here tonight and presenting for us. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. happy
Thanks,
to do it.
everyone. Thanks for your thoughtful questions.
Yeah, appreciate it, everybody. The feedback's very, very much appreciated.
Mhm.
Thank you. Okay, we can carry on, Marlene.
Yep, just give me a
Okay,
second to get back to the screen.
Is there any,
Well, hold on. Okay, so we're going here, then old business. Okay,
is there any old business? I hear crickets. Okay, is there any new business? More crickets. Okay,
no, you have a hand up. Beverly and Candy raise their hand.
Beverly?
Yes, thank you. And I'm so sorry. I meant to try to do this during an announcement. I just wanted to let everyone know about a town hall meeting that's going to be held on Thursday, AB Center at 34 West 134th Street. This is for a town hall meeting for the tenant interim lease programs, buildings. We're going to have elected officials and several council persons there. Senator Claire, Assemblyman De Los Santos, and Al Taylor, Ms. Sanchez from the Housing and Buildings from community, from the, what do you call it? City Council, along with Ms. Jordan and De La Rosa and Lewis and Hudson. So I didn't know how to put the information like the poster that they have in the chat. I've been trying, all this time, but I will send it to Marlene and maybe she can disperse it to everyone for that date. And everyone is also, I would love for this community to be present at that so you can hear about the TIL programs and their status. Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. And Candy?
Hi, thank you. Thanks, everyone. What I would like to do is, can we follow up? I know that we have a lot on our plate, and this was very, I want to thank you for bringing in NYCHA so like that we can talk about this whole PAC stuff, which I'm still annoyed with the fact that NYCHA can do all these repairs still. I can't believe that they're still going to be crying about the $40 billion for the past few years and still getting money from, converting our buildings. And when I say our buildings, I mean the NYCHA buildings in our community that, they could be doing this themselves. They just let things rotten, and get things rotten. But as we continue to have conversations with NYCHA, we also have the private development sector where we have supportive housing that have come before us to say that they're going to help people who have, that are having, I'm trying to find, I want to say, have some mental challenges and they need supportive housing. And at the end of the day, we're not getting that. And I've experienced something for the past few weeks, days with some groups that we've supported to do supportive housing in our community, and to find out that they're only going to service and provide housing to individuals who are either an addicted or formerly incarcerated or some other issues, but behavioral mental disability. And that's not what we supported in the past. And I think that we should also have them come back to us and give us a status on how they're actually giving supportive services and how they're doing their tenant selection plan as they have vacancies in their developments that we've supported in the past. I would like to just make sure that we cover those bases for those individuals also that need advocacy and need a place to stay, and they really don't have nowhere to go, and they're not giving them the housing that they deserve. And instead you see them still in the shelters or out in the street, and families are stuck with trying to figure out how to provide the appropriate housing and the services that they need to address their services and everything. And I know that was a lot we got going on, but housing is a big crisis right now. And as we move every day, we have a lot of things going on with that. But I'm pretty disappointed that some things got converted and we can't even support, these individuals as well. So that's, I just wanted to bring that up and see how we can also bring decent, housing providers that provides social services and supportive housing. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Candy. Anyone else? Marlene?
You have a hand up from Claudia.
No, Claudia?
Maybe it was an old hand.
Hello? Okay. The SYEP applications have been extended till April 14th. On the NYCHA front, we are requesting ERAP. So if people didn't know, when it came to the ERAP, NYCHA residents were able to fill out the applications, but we did not qualify because we already were considered receiving government subsidy. So nobody in NYCHA got the ERAP. So what we've been doing for the last couple of months and over the last 2 weeks, we've been in Albany multiple times. We've been to DC in talking with Marsha Fudge and them, on the housing issues. But I just want people to understand that when you have a NYCHA resident who has filled out the ERAP application and they having problems paying their rent, when they go to the NYCHA management office, they're telling them to go for the one-shot deal. Now, the problem with that is if you want that one-shot deal, which is not always guaranteed, you have to take yourself off of the ERAP list. So in order to even apply for the one-shot deal. Now, let's just say they don't get the one-shot deal. They still are in arrears of rent and they have no way to get back on that ERAP list. So it looks like we're gonna get funding. I'm just implore you guys to speak to the Assembly and Congress to make sure that this funding comes because it's very important. There are multiple vacancies in the NYCHA buildings. I could tell you in Washington houses alone, we have over 100 empty apartments. So that's something we also need to be looking out for. Thank you guys and have a good night.
Thank you. Okay, and anyone else?
No, that's it.
Okay, so we can go on to the next slide, please. Okay, the next Housing Committee meeting will be Tuesday.
Do you want to call the roll, John? I'm sorry to cut you off.
I'm sorry about that. Yes, please do.
Juhab Chowdhury. Diane Collier.
Here.
Roger Flores. Brandon Gillespie.
Here.
John Green.
Here.
Alonzo Johnson. Beverly Pabon.
Present.
Claudia Perez.
Present.
Dawn Sanders.
Present.
Henry Vasquez is excused. Candy Vives Vasquez.
Yeah.
And Jason Wu.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, the next Housing Committee meeting will be Tuesday, May 2nd at 6:30 p.m. Stay tuned to make sure to see whether or not it's in person or virtual. Let's now have a good night, and I call the meeting adjourned at 8:49 p.m. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night. Shalom, shalom, everyone. Good night.